I'm Alex Rondinan, and welcome to If History is Any Guide, the political and current affairs program on Bizz 99.9 FM Substitute Radio. This talk is going to address something that should have been thoroughly dealt with and debunked a good 2 or 3 years ago. Political atheism, operating as a political current in the left. Such a set of political ideas and theories about how the world works, which is utterly reactionary, but often coats itself in the gloss of progressivism, should have disappeared from the moment that the Arab Spring arose, or when Occupy arose, or when the revival of the American labor movement arose. In other words, such a horrid set of ideas, such that political atheism is, could only seriously exist in a political climate of retreat, backwardness, and failure for the left. And thus, as these last couple of years have shown, when the class struggle picks up, these ideas should disappear. Unfortunately, these ideas haven't yet disappeared, but are still lingering around us, like the smell of a rotting corpse, preventing us from properly marching forward and achieving victories in the struggles of today. History should have rendered these ideas null, but they are stubbornly remaining. Thus, what this current situation requires is the forceful and unapologetic pushing of history forward. This talk, therefore, seeks to fully expose, humiliate, and debunk all that political atheism is and stands for, thereby reducing its importance in the Western left to zero. Then, after this talk is finished, with political atheism's core ideas smashed into smithereens, with the ideology's followers either having stopped being politically active and gone home, or been converted to a more progressive set of ideas, we can focus our attention solely and comprehensively on the struggles our generation must face. This talk is going to be broken into 3 parts. First, we're going to discuss the Marxist view of religion, both as a device for understanding it and as a guide to the eventual getting rid of it. This can be contrasted with political atheism's views, which can neither coherently explain religion's existence nor provide us with a guide to getting rid of it. Secondly, without looking into the specifics of political atheism's thinkers or ideas, we're going to lay down an explanation as to where the doctrine came from, why it has been so popular over this past decade, and why it hasn't disappeared yet from the Western left's discourse. And thirdly, we're going to investigate the actual ideas of political atheism by first-hand critiquing the literature that has been used to popularize their ideas, spread their message, and create a fellowship. Marxists are, firstly, dialectical materialists, which means that as we look at the world and study it as a means to understanding it, we are able to properly appreciate and acknowledge that what we discover, while always avoiding the 2 epistemological traps that others fall into, namely mechanical materialism and idealism. History must be seen neither as a singular road of humanity's ideas, nor as the tale of nature unquestionably dominating human life, but instead it should be viewed as a dynamic, contradictory system, which can often involve tremendous explosions of change that come from internal contradictions. In order to understand religion properly, there are 3 dialectical relationships that must be viewed as dynamic and flexible and mustn't be oversimplified into monologues, so that we may understand the world properly. Between humans and nature, between ideas and material reality, and between humans and humans. Humans and nature is related to which force is the dictator when it comes to deciding how life will be run. Ultimately, it will be nature that decides whether or not life can continue on Earth. But humans are capable of taking advantage of, amending, and altering nature so that the overall outcomes of its behavior are changed. Ultimately, humans live in the material world and are dictated by the matter that is around them, while also being matter themselves. And this doesn't necessarily mean that they understand or are aware of the material forces. There may be times when humans do understand the material world, so that their ideas and material reality are the same, but equally there may be times when they cannot understand, so that a human's ideas of how the world works do not coincide with how it actually materially does. The founding basis of the origin of religion is that the relationship between humanity and nature is grossly imbalanced. Early humanity was without tools or technology to control nature, and nature would ruthlessly impose itself upon the humans, so that human survival was totally dependent on nature's mercy, which is then reflected in the bizarre phenomenon of non-existent beings coming into people's minds. As Friedrich Engels put it, quote, "All religion is nothing but the fantastic reflection in men's minds of those external forces which control their daily life, a reflection in which the terrestrial forces assume the form of supernatural forces. When humans lack control over their own lives, and this is done so by forces outside of their realm of understanding, they require phantoms and gods in order to make sense of the world. There is that great blue thing in the sky, which sometimes provides rain and sometimes sunlight and sometimes is dark. Without the necessary scientific tools for knowing what it is, humans say that the sky is a god, whose conscious actions upon the humans is dependent on being pleased or displeased with their worship of him. As humanity travelled through the stages of civilization, eventually reaching the point of the scientific revolution, they would be given the necessary tools for understanding the entire world, how it worked, what it was made up of, and exactly what acting upon nature was necessary to alter or ameliorate human life. There are innumerable examples of humans acting upon nature to make their lives easier or simpler or better, including building houses out of trees, using special techniques for farming, controlling the flow of water in rivers to create dams, etc., etc. If we expand this truism to the grandest conclusions possible, we would see a linear relationship between human technology and religiosity, so that as humans developed the tools and technologies to control and dominate nature, the level of their viewing nature as a supernatural entity would decline. Religion, this theory would assert, would disappear at the scientific revolution and enlightenment era, so that humanity would be entirely atheistic by the time of the Industrial Revolution. Clearly, the theory hasn't come true, because there is still religion today, even with all this technology around us. In order to wrestle out of this muddle, one has no choice but to capitulate to the misanthropic and elitist notion of educating the stupid masses. All humans who still follow religion are needlessly fearing nature. They are under-evolved, still psychologically living in the caveman era of praying to the sun and giving sacrifice to their supernatural, non-existent gods. It would require an atheistic scientific minority who have evolved beyond the need for religion to enlighten the ignorant masses. Show them the technology we have, show them how their supernatural beings are actually fantasies of their own minds, and bring them into the world of the intellectual aristocracy. There is still the third dialectical materialism relationship that hasn't been looked at yet, namely humans and humans. For the last 5 to 10,000 years, ever since the agricultural revolution, humanity has been a class-divided society. There has been a divide between those humans who work and produce the wealth of society and those who own and control it. In feudal Europe times, it was the serfs who did the actual work, producing the food to feed everyone, and yet it was the lords who would legally own the land, the serfs, and the food being produced. The lord would leave the serf enough food to stay alive, but would keep hold of the rest, thereby accumulating an amount of wealth that they didn't participate in the creating. No matter the society we investigate, we see the same conflict arising. On the one hand, a group of humans who do all the work but live in poverty, destitution, misery, and hardship, and on the other hand, a group group of humans that don't do any work, legally own everything, and are able to steal as much produced wealth as they possibly can. In our society today, we have capitalism, in which the same relationship takes place. In short, one group of humans is dominating over and controlling another group, and this domination involves a material form of exploitation. It's at this point that we come to the phenomenon known as ideology, which is crucial to understanding why religion exists today. For that ruling class, the lords and capitalists and kings who control the world's wealth but don't do any of the labor to create it, there needs to be a set of ideas which justify and legitimate this situation. This can be in the form of self-delusion, but it's mostly in the form of confusing and deluding the masses. In either case, it's about preventing people from understanding the material reality of the situation, which is obviously unjust, barbaric, and exploitative. If the masses were to realize that they were being exploited, could not find a legitimate reason for why the status quo existed, and were confident and willing to do something about it to change the situation, then an uprising and revolution would be extremely likely to take place. Religion, acting as an ideology, is just such a set of ideas that can be used to serve that purpose. The situation is legitimized because the king or lord claims that he is the representative of God, and that therefore this exploitation should be allowed. The exploitative and barbaric reality can be given a religious gloss by the serf being told that he is serving not the king but his God, and that he is buying his way into heaven through servitude, even if the serf was angry and wanted to revolt. Notions such as the original sin, which disempower and humiliate ordinary people into submission, would prevent this from taking place. A key feature of religious ideology is to make ordinary people feel impotent and weak, even though in factual reality they are the ones that do all the actual work which produces society's wealth, and which gives society all of its meaning and purpose to continue to exist into the future. And that's all the time we have for today. You've been listening to If History is Any Guide, the political and current affairs program on Bizz 99.9 FM Substitute Radio. I'm Alex Rondinan. Until next time, goodbye.